Hey everybody, this is Terror Talk with Shannon and Kathy.
It sure is.
I will warn everyone, I have a little bit of a cold, so if I start to cough, well, I'll try to edit it out, but every now and then, it simply won't be possible.
It's okay because all that means is you had a little bit of time to relax.
That's right. It means I relaxed and got sick. You know how that goes.
Yes, I do.
Today on the show, we're going to talk about the Jinx true crime documentary, which is super famous. It's on so many lists after the first season of it, and the second season dropped this year. But during the first season of the Jinx, it was revolutionary and amazing, and it tops all of the top 10 true crime documentary lists because it literally led to a second trial for Robert Durst.
This guy.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, he's an idiot. He's an idiot. But a lot of that also comes from, he felt he was pretty damn limitless.
Yeah. He grew up in a very, very, very wealthy New York family. Caucasian male in the real estate business, generationally billionaire, generations of people, that were built on this long history of making money in real estate in New York. So by the time it came to Robert Durst's childhood and existence, I saw one interview where it was like, I have always had more money than I could spend. It wasn't ever about money.
Well, and I think that's a really good point because we know that, I don't have this personal problem of having too much money I don't know what to do with, but from seeing interviews with people, certain celebrities or people who have been heirs to things, there's something I think super valuable about working for what you gain.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and something really rewarding about that contributes to life's purpose and also, I think, connecting with others, right? Like, because most people do have to work hard.
Yeah.
To some degree. Mm-hmm. Some have to work much harder than others, but most people have to earn their living.
Right.
And their space in society. I honestly look at someone like him and I go, I would never want a life that purpose and meaning and all of that was so jeopardized because everything was already kind of done and decided for him by the time he was born.
Yeah, and it's interesting because what you learn about him all the way through it is he didn't want to be a part of the family business from the very beginning. And ultimately he ends up, going back. He marries the love of his life and lives in Vermont, and then his dad or whoever goes out and says, listen, you got to come back to the family business. What are you doing? You got to support a family, etc. And he goes back and he always resents it. So it's interesting. He lives in this, my impression is he lives in this headspace of like, I was given this and I'm entitled and I take advantage of that at every turn. And ends up being a murderer and murders that love of his life and murders his best friend and murders the random guy he lives next to when he's on the run. And he resents it and hates it, but uses it to its full advantage. So there's that dialectic living in him from what I can tell.
I think so too. And we always talk about things on a continuum and like the importance of adding context. So I want to be really careful about the next statement that I make. I want to just preface that I'm not drawing a causational thing like this causes that, but more so that this complicated, I think, what was already there, which is he was there when his mother took her life when he was a child. And later he claimed that he actually witnessed it before she jumped off the roof of their home. And obviously we know that having someone in your family, your life, or a parent who ends their life does not make you a murderer. However, there's all these other seeds planted over here. And then it's just really interesting. I wonder how much of that also contributed to this blunted emotional piece where it's everything in him just kind of shut off. I don't know.
Yeah, I imagine it was very traumatic, and the way the story goes is that his father, walked him into a room where there was a window, and he looks outside and his mom is standing on the roof, and dad is like, wave to mommy. And
Jesus Christ.
And he waves to her, what have you. He kind of like walks away, goes to bed, and then hears the smash of mommy on the ground. And all of the newspapers and stuff kind of said that she fell, but she didn't fall. She was suicidal and killed herself off the roof. And there's that story, right? I don't know if that's the way it really went down or anything, but I imagine that means he grew up with a great hatred for his father.
Yeah.
And an internalized hatred and an anxious hatred, right? Like not knowing exactly where it came from or why. And then watching your mom do that at such a young age.
You can maybe conclude, and this is, again, I'm just like drawing inferences from
Me
the
too.
little information that we have, but you can also maybe conclude that dad was abusive for a number of reasons. One, something drove his wife to want to escape, and maybe that was her own mental illness. I don't know. But then you put that in conjunction with the fact that the siblings were all in therapy for like what they call sibling rivalry, but what I would probably deem as sibling abuse. It was very severe. And notably, like the psychiatrist early on experienced potential like prodromal symptoms of schizophrenia in Robert. So like when I hear all of that together, I'm like, this is a traumatic family with probably a lot of domestic violence.
Yeah, probably. We don't really know.
We don't know.
But we do know that Robert abused his wife. That part is clear, physically and emotionally, I would say, because he was the one that said, when she got pregnant, that he was not interested in having children. And the idea is that she was, but she got an abortion in order to stay in a relationship with him. And then later, she wanted to divorce him, and he was doing the coercive control thing that we talk about so often on the show and not letting her go, basically. And the evidence shows that she went to a divorce lawyer the week before he killed her. So that is a lot of times what happens when we see in these abusive relationships, where the person actually gets the stones and the support and the chutzpah, whatever you want to call it, the strength, the courage to get out, and then is either assaulted very badly and injured or killed because of trying to get out of the abusive relationship. And that's what this was. There's a 2010 movie.
Is it All the Pretty Things?
All Good Things.
All Good Things
is what it's called. Yeah, it's a thriller crime movie, which is a fiction, but it is based on this story. So if you wanted to check it out, it's nothing fantastic, but it does have Ryan Gosling and Kirsten Dunst and Frank Langella. I don't know.
He was in Brain Scan. We're going to be talking about that soon.
He's amazing. He plays the dad.
I love him. I think it's Langella.
There you go. I watched that. So I had never seen it before. So I watched that. It's, it's obviously a fictional account of it, but they do have a lot of the actual facts that we know of from it. So, and the first season, I would say that Kathy and I both recommend this documentary. And season 2 is out. And so if you haven't watched any of it and you like true crime documentaries, and you, for whatever reason, have a gap in your true crime documentary watching and have missed this, I would definitely say start with season 1 and watch all 6 episodes, and then watch all 6 episodes of the second season.
In the first season, they start to talk a little bit about his good friend Susan Berman, who becomes somewhat of like a potential suspect in the disappearance of his wife. I'm not going to go into like all this detail, but the reason why I bring this up is he had so many enablers in his life.
Yeah, a billionaire will have that, right?
Oh my God. Like the amount of people he had protecting him, even just calling him Bobby, like he's a boy.
Yeah.
Like he's just Bobby, right?
Right.
Every time I heard that, I'm like, they're just so protective, like he's a little brother. And because maybe let's just talk about how he presents for a minute.
Yeah, I was thinking that while you were talking. I mean, he is at the very least schizoaffective, right?
Oh,
Like you just spend any time watching the documentary, you don't even have to know him and the way he speaks and his affect. And I mean, I don't have any idea what complicates that, but schizoaffective is his presentation to me.
yeah. And what Shannon's talking about is basically someone who has schizophrenia in the presence of a mood disorder. So it's like, all this kind of blunted affect and then, clearly some delusions. The guy, he's constantly talking to himself.
I know, which is what ends up being in trouble. So from now on, we're probably going to talk spoilers. So if you haven't watched any of the documentary, at least season 1, I don't think we're going to get too much into season 2, but the season 1, because it's been out for several years, we're going to get into some spoilers. So at least go watch season 1. And again, season 2 has dropped, and we both recommend going out and checking that out because it's not as like revolutionary as season 1, I would say, but it's the conclusion of the story. So,
yeah.
So yes, season 1, that's what gets him in trouble. He ends up talking when he's still on camera and still on mic and incriminating himself. And then after that happens, they they end up opening up the case, and the producers take the evidence to the DA, who's out, definitely out to get him, out to convict him, still on the hunt for him, and bring the evidence and then send him back to trial, and on we go. He sits for a second trial, and as we all know, if you read the news, he's convicted and has since died because he was pretty sickly in the trial. So
He was. Yeah, he the first season is really focused on the disappearance of his first wife.
Right.
And the whole story allows the audience to understand the amount of people in his life who essentially helped him build this narrative. I mean, if you watch, once you get into season 2, it gets even thicker. But this guy is a complete psychopath. I mean, anybody that could get in his way, even if he had as much as a sociopath or psychopath can have a meaningful relationship, the moment that person is no longer serving a purpose, there's absolutely nothing getting in the way of literally taking that person's life.
Right.
And it's scary to watch how, for him, how matter of fact he was through this whole thing, even through his disclosure, which I go back and forth and wondering how much of he talking on the mic was his mental illness and being Robert Durst and being a weirdo and not realizing people were listening. And I kind of balanced that out with also like the thrill of being discovered that way, or maybe just hearing enough, or his omnipotence. Like, it's hard to know because he was told that his mic was on in the first season, and then he makes the same mistake.
So the first trial that you watch through the first several episodes is the murder of Morris Black. And as you guys know, if you're listening, because you've already watched it, he's acquitted from that. And I definitely had those thoughts of like, of course he gets off, I mean, the money, and we're kind of knee deep in researching the OJ case because we're going to do an episode on it. And so I was having, thoughts of that, where money and influence and fame and all of that clouds all of those things. But I also know that, and they talk about this, that once you do a self-defense and there's only two people in the room, very hard to prove.
Well, but even his story. So what ends up happening is he tells his story is that it was self-defense. But he has really good attorneys, because if you watch the episode, it's so clear that what he was alleging was nearly impossible.
Yeah, they never found the fucking head.
He had no head.
And the head was the thing that would prove what happened. And so the jury probably sat there going, we don't have the evidence.
Well, and there was evidence tampering.
Yeah, it's like he doesn't get convicted even though he admits to chopping up the body and getting rid of it because he was scared or whatever. It's like, really? Okay.
Well, and you think so he pleads guilty on 2 accounts, right? And one count, I think one count of evidence tampering, he pleads guilty to. The ease in which he's able to essentially get off for good behavior and all this stuff. Again, we talk about privilege. And we talk about how if someone like Robert Durst ends up in a prison setting as a psychopath, he probably does incredibly well. He's not reacting to much. He's not like a narcissistic, egotistical. I mean, there might be narcissism in there without a doubt, but what's driving him is his psychopathy. And so a lot of these guys go into prison and are let out on good behavior because they're incredibly unaffected and know how to work the system in there to be protected. And I think we talked about this, maybe it was the Iceman Killer. These guys go to prison and they do incredibly well.
Oh, yeah.
It's very different than we see with some of these other folks who may not be psychopaths, where they function well in a prison system. Well,
because, for many reasons, but one is that everyone is trying to curry favor with them.
Yes.
Prison is nothing if not a hierarchy and a power structure. And anybody going in there with so much money and so much power everyone's going to curry favor.
He was smart enough to plead guilty to the things that would, this is another thing that I think psychopaths and narcissists will do. They'll do this sleight of hand. Look over here so you're not looking over here. I think where he was really smart is that he pleaded guilty on 2 counts of bail jumping and 1 count of evidence tampering. So he's, I'm admitting I'm doing that. That's where he got his 5 years. Because he was acquitted from the murder. And then, you look at the trial judge by the name of Susan Chris, and she's like, you could see that whoever killed this person knew exactly what they were doing. This was not self-defense.
Which trial are we talking about?
This is Black's trial.
Okay.
Yeah. So this was years later. She was interviewed. And she was like, this body was cut perfectly. This person knew where to locate muscle. And this was not the first time this person had decapitated somebody.
Crazy.
So we see this time and time again. We saw, Dahmer, Bundy, all these guys get let off early on, only for enough time to go by, and it enables them to do more.
Yeah, and who knows? I always figure whatever they get caught for, or whatever we end up talking about, is so much less than they actually did.
Oh, for sure. We would say, when I was working with sex offenders, we would say, well, this is just the crime they got caught for. I've never done something like this before. Oh, you most certainly have.
Oh, I think you have.
This is just the first time you've been caught.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're not stupid enough to admit to all the other things you did.
You wonder how many other people he harmed, killed, lives that were ended that maybe weren't as significant as these 3 people.
You do wonder.
Yeah.
It's always interesting when a psychopath presents with an overlying mental illness, like, let's say, hypothetically schizoaffective or something in those lines, like because the presentation is so different than what we would feel with a psychopath. And also, the thing that wars in my head against the schizoaffective is that people like him. He's good with people. He's charming. Everyone who comes in contact with him says like that they like him and they enjoy him and that he's a good friend and he's funny and all that. Now, obviously, that's clouded by culture and money and socioeconomic status. And did they really feel that way? Were they clouded by power and money and what he could give them? I don't know. But he had friends. He had a wife who fell in love with him in the beginning, like genuinely in the beginning. So that's where it's clouded, it's complicated, it's layered, because whereas as an old man in these interviews, he presents very flat, but he's also likable and charming and interesting to watch, right? So that psychopathy that we can see, that charming part of psychopathy, that surface charm, I don't really feel like in this documentary we ever really see the underbelly of that. Like he hides that very well. Whatever rage, anger, abusiveness, pain, trauma, whatever's really underneath all of that, we don't ever really see it.
No, he
I didn't even see glimpses of it. Really.
and probably all that stuff came out mostly behind closed doors.
Apparently.
Because there were problems in his marriage with Kathy, and that was talked about quite a bit.
Yeah, that's the only reason why we know it's there.
That's why,
and the murders.
Yeah. But I think you're right. If we look at someone like Dennis Rader, who's the BTK, and you look at interviews with him versus interviews with Robert Durst, it's not pleasant watching interviews with Dennis Rader.
No, this guy's more like a Dahmer where...
But
he's kind of like likable,
endearing. I mean, and there were people that are like, "Why do I like this guy?"
I know.
Why do I like this guy?
Because you do. I mean, Kathy and I, just before we were recording, we were like, his personality and the way he is and his quirkiness is one of the reasons why the documentary is interesting to watch.
Absolutely, and why it was made, because he's so quirky.
Absolutely, is a totally odd duck, and also because of what they uncovered. That's definitely why the movie, documentary did what it did, is because, he incriminated himself and that evidence led to a new trial ultimately.
I think one of the parts of the documentary that I think was more emotional, or at least for me it was the opening of season 2. I can't remember if it's end of season 1. I think it's beginning of season 2, where you see the family's reaction. They're watching the show. Mm-hmm. And that was really good. That was powerful. So, what happens, and again, spoiler here, so pause or fast forward. And by this time you've heard a lot anyway, but there's a part in one of the episodes where, the family members of the deceased are all watching this documentary as it airs.
Yeah.
And they don't know what Bob's going to say. They don't, but they all in their heart know that he killed their significant others, their loved ones. And when he does that disclosure off camera, when he has his wire on, and you just hear like people going, "Oh my God." Like it's just like they finally get their, it's a painful kind of justice.
Yeah.
But it's a really powerful moment, I think, in the documentary.
Absolutely. They're even on camera with the DA that's been kind of hunting him and trying to figure out how to actually convict him. And the DA and the cops that were on the case, the original like Morris Black case, those people are represented in the people that are hearing it for the first time. And they obviously knew, the producers obviously knew what they had, and they were like, we got to get cameras in the room with the people when they watch this last episode of the first season, because we got to get their reactions. Like, that's definitely part of this movie. And so they probably were tipped off to the fact that something revolutionary was going to happen, because obviously they're in a room and the cameras are on them. And, the producers wanting their reaction means something's going to happen. So you just like watch them with bated breath, because you just see all their faces. And even the DA and the cops, and I remember one of the things I don't know about you guys, but when the cop is sitting there and he's watching and his eyes kind of widen, and I think his wife or somebody's next to him and says like, that's a confession, right? Like that's him admitting it, right? And the cop's just like sort of dazed and nodding like, yeah, like he's just taking it in because he's of course thinking like, is it usable? Is it not usable?
Yeah.
He's got his cop head on.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that part, that's that gripping conclusion to season 1 that had us all like, what?
Yeah.
Originally. And then them doing a season 2 is pretty great.
Yeah, he's something to watch. He, as anybody who, reads behavior for a living, he's kind of a fascinating character to watch. Mm-hmm. But then also for me, just watching the way psychology works within the legal system and how frustrated I get to watch like how far and how long this guy was able to go without being held accountable simply because, he was so protected.
And of course, all the people that were on his side and family and all of that were like, I told you not to do that documentary.
Yeah. They're like, you idiot.
It's like, yeah, but his ego and his entitlement and his psychopathy, really, right? Like it always undermines you and also gives you what you were seeking, which is, can I do this documentary and get away with it? Well, can I convince America?
Yeah.
Can I convince the whole? That's the challenge, right? That's the tweak. It's like, can I do? I'm going to try to do this documentary, and I'm going to convince the whole world that I'm innocent. Like that was the bait for him.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah. Well, because especially he had agreed with the producers, like, so what do you think about interviewing me for this? Like he was just so leaning into like, I have an idea here.
He wanted it so bad.
He called Bob. He's like, hey, it's Bob.
The phone calls are great. It's Bob.
Yeah, collect call from Bob.
Yeah, from the prison.
But that conversation that he has with the producer cracks me up though, because he's just like, so I've been thinking. And I wonder what it would be like if I was part of this documentary with you. He's
just like, yeah, good idea, Bob.
He's like, what an idiot.
Yeah.
And there lies the ego, like you said, and the omnipotence. And let me give America what they want.
Well, and that overwhelming psychopathic drive to control larger and larger and larger, like controlling the one person in your life that's your significant other and then ultimately controlling their death, right? Controlling your best friend and then ultimately controlling their death. Controlling your friend and neighbor and they get annoying and controlling their death and cutting them up and doing all of this stuff. And then whatever else he did or didn't do besides that, he couldn't help himself.
Right.
There's no way once he was approached in any way that he wasn't going to. It's like I said, it's just like Dahmer. Like, let's do all the interviews because I'm going to show you what a great guy I am.
Well, I don't think it's any different than when someone who's guilty is like, let me testify. It's like, no. You just automatically look guilty.
And you probably are because you said that because nobody innocent wants to testify, honestly. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't think so anyway. That's just my bias, but... Yeah. So anyway, we recommend this. If you haven't checked out season 2, please do. It's It's an interesting bit of business. So we appreciate you listening to Terror Talk. Thank you so much. This has been an episode of Terror Talk, and my name is Shannon.
And I'm Kathy. Sleep safe, everyone.